So I'm John Daniel. My talk is on ethical and sustainable on-call, and we'll get into what that means in a minute. For those of you who don't know, that's a solar farm. Very ethical, very sustainable, very good. So my working environment. A bit different from my startup days. I'm in a company with about 150 developers. We have more applications than we do developers, which terrifies some people, but it's okay, it's fine. A lot of apps are owned by multiple teams, and our on-call rules vary from team to team. This is still kind of a new and exciting world for us. Those of you who don't know, I work here, Living Social. We sell stuff on the internet. If you want to do Ruby, Clojure, iOS, Android, etc., come talk to me. You've probably all heard this before, so I'm not going to say anything else. I'm on the recently formed core services team, and we are responsible for building basically the core data model and services that are essential to the entire operation of the business. This is kind of a new philosophy for us. We used to just have very separate teams working on their own thing, and sometimes they'd crosstalk, but not very well or often. We're mostly Ruby, a little bit of Clojure, a tiny, tiny bit of Scala, but that's going away. More Clojure in the future. 8-ish developers, but maybe as many as 12 soon, who knows. But yeah, this is my team. So when we get into on-call, there's a very important thing to remember. And I hit the wrong button on the slide. So always remember, things will go wrong. This is picture is way darker than I thought it was going to be, but that is a neighborhood power outage. That was, somewhere, literally flicker power outage. So things are going to go wrong, and that's just going to happen. Outages are as certain as death and taxes, and you need to just accept this. Now, in a traditional world where we built one large or a few large applications, an outage was a huge, huge, huge deal. If something was down, somebody was getting woken up immediately to address this. But many of us don't build single applications anymore. The world of software is changing. It's evolving. We build for a service-oriented architecture. And that pretty much takes single responsibility principle to an extreme. We have small classes, we have small functions, so why not small applications? There's no need to have a 500,000 line application when we can have a whole bunch of 1,000-line applications. So service-oriented architecture requires that we rethink how we build software. And this is very good. If you haven't investigated this yet, do it. It changes your life. So maybe we should rethink on-call a little bit too. Because service-oriented outages look different. For those of you who don't know, that's New York City, shortly after Hurricane Sandy, when Con Edison cut power to half of the island. That was real bad. I know at least one of you was involved in that. And it was terrible, but this kind of behaves similarly to service-oriented architecture. Power was out to half the island, but a lot of things kept humming along as normal. People kept going to work. People kept conducting business. Transactions were happening. Traffic was flowing very slowly, but it was. So SOA allows us to continue humming along following these non-catastrophic failures. The island didn't break off and float off into the sea. It just lost power. That wasn't a catastrophe. We can just keep operating. People kept living their lives, at least in theory. So why does SOA give us these things? Well, we have data distribution. We don't have single databases that we retrieve everything from anymore. We have lots of them. We can sometimes replicate this data across various different databases using tools like Kafka. We have circuit breakers that prevent cascading failure. If one service goes down, everything doesn't go down with it. We have right behind caching. We make a service request. We store it later. If we try to make that again in the future and it fails, we have this last known good concept. Monitoring, alerting, blah, 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 and you're probably wondering why I'm talking about all this. Well, these are all concepts that we have in building our applications. But we haven't thought of everything yet, and we probably never will. So you can really think of an outage as a use case you have yet to account for. And when I first heard this, my mind kind of just did. But it's true. We have these small applications. They have very few touch points. There are very few ways that apps can talk to these other smaller apps. So these failures should be understood. And if they can be understood, they can be mitigated. So with all that in mind, an on-call person's job is to prevent catastrophe, not react to failures. So you need to be proactive towards things, not reactive. And this, of course, leads to the ethical and sustainable concept of on-call that we've developed. So we have some basic tenets. First up, all developers are included, even the junior developers, once they're ready. Your rotation is roughly 1 week in our situation. It can be more, it can be less, varies by organization. Your day-to-day job is to defend against interruption, and that sounds really obvious, but I'll get to what that really means in a few minutes. You are not supposed to be shipping features. Sometimes this is necessary, but for the most part, don't do it. And when systems are stable, just be flexible. The on-call developer doesn't have to work the same shift as everybody else. Things can be different. So first up, all developers are included. This describes itself. Every developer who is on your team should be part of the on-call rotation, including the junior developers. I cannot stress this enough. Work with your junior developers. They are your organization's future. That includes on-call. That may mean that sometimes you have to have a junior developer on call at the same time as a senior developer, and they work together, and you teach them, and you be a mentor for them, and that's great. But do this. Make sure there are no outs, there are no special excuses as to why I can't be on call, unless there is a legitimate excuse. Your rotation is 1 week, can be more, can be less. Pick what's best for your organization. We're a fairly large company, so 1 week is the default for most things, so we just kind of went with 1 week, and that's Monday to Monday. So during your on-call rotation, it's important that this isn't just an ad hoc thing. You need to have a plan. We have an idea of what our on-call person needs to work on during that week. So an on-call backlog, just like your feature backlog or your bug fix backlog, these are all acceptable. Have these 25 things we would like an on-call person to address eventually. And this is sounding more like regular development than actually being on call. But you're on call, so be prepared for the unexpected. At any moment, at the drop of a hat, something could go terrible, and you need to just throw away whatever you're working on, well, get stashed whatever you're working on, and jump into fighting whatever fire is coming. So the next tenet is defend against interruptions of both services and your team members. You protect your team's productivity. You're not protecting your services necessarily, you're keeping all your other teams productive and working and happy. This means that you need to triage issues as they come in. This means you need to be the point person for day-to-day operational concerns. If somebody suspects a performance degradation, if somebody suspects a field has changed, any number of issues, you need to be that first point of contact. However, you can escalate if necessary. It doesn't mean you have to fix every bug, but you need to at least be knowledgeable enough to triage every bug, fix the ones that you can fix, and those that you can't, push them off to whatever teams are responsible. But make sure that, for the most part, your other coworkers are being happy and productive. One controversial tenet that we've had is no shipping features. I'm not gonna lie, this is still a bit of a pain point for us. We're still working on it. But the idea is that you are doing this. You are maintaining the infrastructure. You are working on the power lines, making sure that the bits are flowing and that things that are working today continue to hum along. You are not doing this. You are not developing new infrastructure. You are not building new features. You're not building this giant nuclear power plant in India that is super cool looking, in my opinion. So you may ask, well, what should I be doing? Like, if there's nothing broken, why am I on call? What am I doing? Well, this is a giant slide, and I hate huge lists of things, but this is kind of one where it's necessary. You need to be finding and understanding failure cases. You need to look at how your apps are communicating with one another and how this could potentially go wrong. Think of it as a short-term site reliability engineer. You need to be adding failover and error recovery where there is none, because trust me, in a service-oriented architecture, 90% of cases initially are going to be there's no failover. We don't even have rescue exception. Well, don't ever do rescue exception, but rescue some error. You should be writing playbooks for handling outages. For those of you who don't know what playbooks are, it's basically documentation around how your service works, what technologies you're using, handling day-to-day operational issues, and here is a list of common errors, why they happen, and how to fix them. You need to make sure that those are up to date and correct. Amazingly, they're not most of the time. It's absurd. You should be updating libraries, making sure security concerns are addressed, making sure that, oh, there's this performance issue in this version of this gem. We should upgrade to this one because it fixes that. This next point, testing, alerting, and diagnostic tools. We spend a lot of time, especially at Living Social, working with tools like Grafana and Splunk, and these are really amazing tools, and the alerting is broken on them so often. We have these alerts set up. We have these things to let us know when bad things have happened. And when the bad things happen, nothing goes out because we set it up once, a log format has changed, a stats counter has changed, and nobody ever tested it. So do that. And importantly, when something is broken or when you suspect a potential problem, it's okay to apply duct tape. It's okay to just fix the glitch, as they say in Office Space, to get the things humming along so that this catastrophe may not happen tomorrow. But you need to document for the future. Make sure that your team is aware that you've applied duct tape to this particular piece of code to prevent outages, but they need to fix it correctly moving forward. Most importantly, when you're doing these things, you need to be communicating with consumers of your applications. You need to let teams that are consuming your service know that you are on call, you were responsible this week for any issues. If there are any questions they have about your service, if there are any concerns they have, you are the person to address. You need to be communicating with operations, making sure that they know that you're on call, and if they have concerns, you need to be helping them out as well. Last tenet, flexibility when systems are stable. A lot of people that are used to the 9-to-5 type, what we traditionally think of as a company like IBM type roles, this is a little bit weird. Like, flexibility, what do you mean? You mean you just don't come into work some days? And I mean, yeah, that's kind of true. If you get woken up in the middle of the night, feel free to sleep in a little bit. If you know that, say, a load balancer is being updated at 10 p.m. tonight and you're going to probably have to at least monitor tools, it's okay to leave a bit early. It's okay. Use your time as you best see fit. You're a responsible adult. You should be treated like a responsible adult. So be a responsible adult. And for developers who are not currently on call, if an on-call person is having a rough week, cut them some slack. I've had this happen to me numerous times, especially in my startup years, where we had a rough on-call week, we had terrible things happen, and I was just a jerk. I was just absurdly mean to my coworkers, and for any of you former coworkers in the room, I apologize profusely. But if somebody's just grumpy because they got woken up 3 times in a row, just leave them alone, let them calm down, you can figure out the issue on your own. And offer to help if you have extra time. We all have the features that get implemented way faster than we expect, so we have a day of documentation or additional testing. Maybe that's not entirely necessary. Maybe say, hey, I see the on-call backlog is really, really long. Can I help out with a few things? So those are the basic on-call tenets. Has anybody noticed anything is missing from this when you think of on-call? Your phone goes off at 2:30 in the morning sometimes, and that sucks. That's always going to suck. But your job is to make that almost never happen. So why should you be paged? Why should you be woken up? There are a few things to think about, and they all kind of move from one to the other to the other. So you should only be paged when every single other safety mechanism within your organization has failed or is about to fail. Getting a random stack trace that happens one time out of every million in a system that gets 1 million requests a day is not worth paging somebody over. Running into a corner case of a feature that is yet to be publicly released, not worth paging over. Just things need to be very wrong or about to be very wrong before you get paged. You should also be paged when customers are directly impacted. You rolled out a feature to that new customer, they're the only ones using it, but they're a big customer and things are breaking, maybe your on-call rules should be tweaked a little bit to make sure that they get higher priority. But this all kind of just leads into when systems lose value, that's when you need to be woken up. That's when you need to be alerted, and that's when you need to react to these problems that are happening. So really, teams should understand what critical means. You're developing these applications, you're developing these services, you're communicating with these business stakeholders. You should all have an understanding of what bad means, of what, like, okay, if this is going a little slower than usual, that's not worth waking someone up over. But if this financial reporting system is broken and we can't pay merchants, that's real, real bad. So this is going to be kind of familiar, but how should you be paged? PagerDuty has spoiled a lot of us. I remember working in companies that don't have PagerDuty, that have other more terrible on-call systems that I'm not going to say by name, or companies that have extreme not invented here syndrome and build their own. But the way you should be paged is please pick one. Don't do all of them. Push notification is, in my opinion, the best for people who don't like their phones blowing up in the middle of the night. Text message too, phone call, whatever, email. It's okay to do multiple if you fail. If you send a push notification and you don't respond, it's okay to escalate to text message and eventually escalate to a phone call. That's fine, but please don't send me all of them. And your paging system should respect acknowledgements. When I hit the ACK button, yeah, I know, I'm working on it. Don't tell me again over and over and over and over that there's a problem. Sending me a text message, I'm looking at you, Ops Genie, for every single stack trace in your system, completely worthless. There is no point to that. That means I'm going to turn my phone off or at worst break it in half, and that device has lost all value to me now. So what happens when you're woken up? Me personally, I love sleeping. It's the great thing. It's great. When Splatoon did their like sleeping versus eating Splatterfest, sleeping. But when I get woken out of a dream, I am really grumpy. I am not feeling great, and my cognitive state is just terrible. And I'm sure other people feel this way too. So it's important to like kind of rehearse this a little bit and think about this and like, what do I do when that horrible, horrible PagerDuty notification starts going off at 2:30 in the morning, and I need to get out of my euphoric dream state about like flying through the city or whatever and go to work. Step one, stay calm. Once your cognitive function is kind of restored to reasonable human levels, take a deep breath, just inhale, exhale, just collect yourself. You've probably gotten your second follow-up notification by now about things breaking, so hit the acknowledge button. Yeah, I'm working on it. Do not hit the acknowledge button until you are cognitively present again, because I've definitely had this happen before. I hit acknowledge and I fall back asleep. That's super bad. So make sure you are right up in here before you hit that button. So you roll out of bed, you log into your VPN, you log into Slack or HipChat or whatever, post in there that there's an issue and you're addressing it. Make sure it is logged. Make sure people can see that this is happening if someone happens to also be a night owl or just for record-keeping purposes in the future. This is self-explanatory, but like, get things working. It's okay to write terrible, terrible code to make things work again. I cannot tell you how many times we have done stupid, stupid things at all of my various jobs of like, if database ID equals 1234, just don't run that code because we can't figure out why it's broken. And it's 3 in the morning and I need to get to bed. Just get your system humming along to reasonable degrees again. Once that's done, document any fixes. And again, HipChat, Slack, email, all of them, whatever. Notify people that the problem has been addressed, there's going to be a follow-up tomorrow, but it's working, I'm going back to sleep. And actually go back to sleep. Do not stay up all night trying to fix the problem correctly. That is not going to work. So the following morning, communicate with teams, or do this yourself, implement any long-term fixes, reach out to other folks and talk about, hey, you missed a circuit breaker here, or this thing timed out and you didn't retry, or do whatever you need to do. But make sure the long-term fixes do get implemented in a reasonable time frame. Update any playbooks as necessary. One of the things you should have been doing last night, or maybe you're not doing, but you can look at your bash history, is pretty much take some notes on like what you did. It can be even as simple as just copy paste of your bash history, or here's git diff this. Make sure that what you did is recorded and update any playbooks with this information accordingly. Maybe it was as simple as pop a process to reload some configurations and you're done. And most importantly, publish a postmortem. Let teams know that there was a failure. Let them know what you learned from that failure and how things are going to get better moving forward. We learn from every single failure. I have learned some of the best skills in my software development career from when things were horribly, horribly broken, and we somehow managed to fix them. So postmortems, extremely necessary. And please publish them in a persistent way. Sending out an email is great, but emails get lost. Emails get, fall into the ether somewhere. Having a documentation system, something like Confluence, or even just post it to a GitHub repo about, here are a bunch of markdown files of each of our postmortems, super important. Make sure it's easily findable in the future. For you non-on-call developers, respect the on-call rotation. If you suspect a problem, don't immediately start spamming every communication form you possibly can to alert people to that problem. If you have a paging system, if you have PagerDuty or whatever, check acknowledgements in there, see if people are already aware of it. Check any email or Slack for this discussion in relevant team rooms before you start spamming everyone with, hey, there's a problem, there's a problem, there's a problem. If you are knowledgeable of this particular service, even if you are a consumer of this service and understand these failure cases, offer advice. Be willing to help if you have time. And if you caused an outage, even if you think you might be responsible, own up to it. Hey, I know this service is kind of slow, and I know we don't really understand Datomic yet, but I ran this query and then everything stopped working. So maybe it was my fault. Just say it. No hate on Datomic. Datomic's pretty awesome. But be truthful. I have caused so much lost productivity in my younger and stupider years because I was too proud to admit to owning up to an outage. I caused pretty much a whole hosting company's control panel system to go down for about a day, and it was my fault, but I refused to own up to it because I was worried. Nobody's keeping score. We all screw up sometimes. If your boss is going to fire you for a bug, well, then your company sucks and you should work for a better place, But, you know, be truthful. This goes back to what I said before, but do not do any of these things. This is the most toxic behavior ever during an outage, and this will make your team members hate you. Don't keep asking if things are fixed repeatedly. Don't blame others, and don't stop communicating because whatever. We all have cases where we get just too frustrated, like this outage is terrible, and I'm done. I'm logging out of Slack, I'm disconnecting my Wi-Fi, and I'm gonna go live in the woods. Don't do that. Even if you just say, hey guys, or hey everyone, I need to take 5 minutes and walk away. That's fine, but communicate with people, especially if you have valuable information. We're all on the same team here. So lastly, remember this. Every startup can take this advice, should take this advice to heart. Problems are rarely fixed correctly. Notice my terminology here, fixed correctly by exhausted people. If I'm working 80 hours a week and there's a problem, I'm not fixing it correctly. I am gonna write the worst code ever. You're gonna see if statements all over the place, and it's gonna work and it's gonna suck. After exhausting on-call rotations, it's okay to take time off, even if it's as simple as, hey everyone, on Monday I'm gonna sleep in, or hey, I'm gonna take Monday off, or I'll come in Saturday if you need me, or whatever. But exhausting on-call rotations are always a symptom of a larger problem. If week after week the on-call developer is just getting destroyed, they are just in a grouchy mood, they are miserable, their productivity is just poof, down the toilet, that is a symptom of a larger problem. Maybe you need to rethink your architecture a little bit. Maybe you need to rethink processes. Maybe you need to just stop pushing out features, and take time to kind of maintain your infrastructure and improve things. Exhausted people are a cause of downtime. They're probably the biggest cause of downtime. I have seen some horrible, horrible mistakes being made because people are exhausted and they just don't have time anymore. So please take this information to heart. Please talk to others about it and try to get this implemented in your company. Thanks, everyone. Cool power plant picture because I think power plants are cool, and image credits because legal reasons. So thanks, everyone.